Okay, well, hello everyone and good afternoon. My name is Will Snodgrass. I'm a CFP and the founder of MAP25 Capital. We are a Christian wealth management and retirement advisory practice. We're located in the Woodlands. If you're here, you've probably got some version of the same question running in the back of your mind. Am I going to be okay? Most people have worked very hard, they've saved, they try to be faithful, and yet retirement still feels uncertain. It's frankly probably the thing I hear most, even from people that have been very, very successful in their careers. And that's exactly what today is about. So over the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to walk you through 5 specific mistakes that I see Christian families make before retirement. And more importantly, I'm going to show you how to fix each one of those. I'm not going to withhold that information. I want you to leave with some good actionable steps in case you are one of the people making those mistakes inadvertently. So with all that being said, no fluff, no sales pitch. Let's get right into what matters. So before we get started, quick word on disclosures. If you can see this screen, it's just the necessary disclosures. Everything today is for educational purposes only. It's not personal investment, tax, or legal advice for your specific situation. The examples I'm sharing are hypothetical illustrations, not guarantees. And with all that being said, let's get into it. So a little about me real quickly. So my name, like I said, is Will Snodgrass. I am a certified financial planner and the founder of MAP25 Capital. We're based here in the Woodlands, Texas, but work with families all across the U.S. I started this firm, MAP25 Capital, because I believe that Christian families deserve financial advice that starts with scripture, not just spreadsheets. So the firm is actually named after the parable of the talents found in Matthew 25, thus the name. And if you know that parable, you know that the point is we're not the owners of what God has given us. We are the stewards. And stewardship has a standard of faithfulness attached to it. My goal ultimately in my career or vocationally is to come alongside Christians and help them be the most faithful stewards of what the Lord has blessed them with as possible. And that can take a lot of different forms, whether it be investment management, tax mitigation, Social Security optimization, estate and legacy efficiency, a lot more things. But at the core of what we do is trying to help people towards the goal that really all Christians have, which is hearing, well done, good and faithful servant. So that's it. That's the whole mission. Quick note, like I said, we're going to try and cover content in 45 minutes or less. We're also going to do a Q&A at the end. So hold your questions for now, or if you do have any, feel free to drop them in the chat or email them at will@mat25capital.com. We will be recording this as well. So if you need to step away, I can always send a recording later. Okay, so here is the crux of why I want to do this webinar. The average married couple will make retirement decisions over their lifetime worth over $1 million in outcomes. Not in what they earn, but in what they keep, what they pay in taxes, and what they leave ultimately behind. And yet, most families spend more time planning a vacation than they do planning their retirement income strategy, which might sound a little silly to some people, but that is nonetheless the case. The 5 mistakes I'm going to walk you through today can cost a family anywhere from a couple $100,000 to $500,000 from what studies have shown over the course of retirement. And that's not a scare tactic. That's just math. And again, it can vary per person. So don't take this necessarily as fixed number for each person, but it is nonetheless what we've seen. The good news, though, is every single one of these mistakes are fixable, and we're going to cover how to fix them. And in many cases, there's still a window to fix them, even if a person is already close to retired or retired. So with that being said, I'm going to start with a verse and a quick prayer, and we'll jump right in. So Proverbs 16:3 says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. So having said that, let's have a quick prayer. All right, Lord, as always, thank you for your blessings. Thank you always for Jesus first and foremost. I pray that this time is helpful to those that are watching it. May they be blessed, encouraged, walk away with things that can benefit their lives, bless their lives, and bless those they care about and those around them. In Jesus' name, amen. So here's our roadmap. Mistake number 1 is ignoring taxes until it's too late. This is probably the biggest dollar figure mistake that I see, and almost no one talks about it before it's too late. Mistake number 2, getting Social Security timing wrong. There is a 76% difference in your monthly benefit depending on when you claim. And that number surprises a lot of people. And that actually will probably be some of the stats that you'll find are most shocking. Mistake number 3, having no retirement income plan. There is a huge difference between having savings and having income. And we'll break that all down. Mistake number 4, Forgetting to plan for generosity and legacy. Most Christian families, this one hits particularly close to home. And mistake number 5, trying to do it all alone. I'll share some data on what this actually cost people that you may find surprising. But with all that being said, let's go. So mistake number 1, ignoring taxes until it's too late. So here's an illustration that shows really what's at stake. In many cases, retirees can end up paying anywhere between $50,000 to $200,000 more in taxes than they actually had to over the course of a retirement. Not because they did anything wrong per se, but because nobody told them that there was a window to fix it. And I'm going to show you exactly what that window is now, but let's first look at why this happens. So most Christian families who have done a good job of saving have the majority of their money in what we call pre-tax accounts. And these can be things like 401ks, traditional IRAs, things of that nature, 403bs, 457s. That's where every financial incentive has pointed them for 30 years of their career. But here's the problem. Every single dollar that a person pulls from those accounts in retirement is taxed as ordinary income. Every single dollar. And at age 73, the IRS forces you to start taking required minimum distributions, or RMDs, whether you need the money or you don't. Those RMDs can push you inadvertently into a higher tax bracket, which makes your Medicare premiums go up because of something called IRMAA brackets, and up to 85% of your Social Security benefits become taxable as well, which a lot of times is a surprise to people. It's a cascade, and by the time most people see it coming, the window to do something about it is already closing. So that's the bad news. Now, here's the good news. Between the day that you retire, whenever that day may be or whatever age you are, and the day you turn 73, there is a window. During that window, your taxable income is usually at its lowest point in decades. Not always, but a lot of times. You're not drawing a salary, and RMDs haven't kicked in yet. Social Security may also not have started yet at that point. That window is the single best opportunity for many people that they will ever have to convert money from a traditional IRA or 401k or the other retirement accounts I talked about into a Roth IRA at historically low tax rates. And for those of you who aren't familiar, a Roth IRA is taxed essentially the opposite way of a traditional. The money goes into it taxed as income, but then it grows tax deferred and you can draw from it later tax free. So essentially you're paying the tax now at potentially a much lower income tax bracket, could be as low as 12%, 22%, or somewhere in that range, instead of later when RMDs and Social Security push you into a higher tax bracket, potentially above 30% or higher. Roth money, like I mentioned, does grow tax-free, but also it has no RMDs. So there will never be a time where the government tells you you have to take money out. Also, it can pass to your beneficiaries and your heirs tax-free as well. And this is not a loophole. That is the tax code working exactly the way that it was designed. But the question is anyone helping you use it strategically? I cannot tell you how many times I have had people surprised when they hear that not only can Social Security be taxable, but also that they can be pushed into higher Medicare brackets. And then also just the things I mentioned about Roths. Most people are not familiar with how they actually work, especially when it comes to the RMD feature and passing money along to beneficiaries. So moving on to mistake number 2, getting Social Security timing wrong. And here's an illustration that shows the scale. So in many cases, a couple can leave anywhere between $100,000 to $250,000 in total benefits on the table just by choosing a suboptimal claiming strategy. And in case you think it's not confusing enough, research actually shows that for a married couple, there are about 2,000 different claiming strategies and combinations that you could choose between. And I'm not misstating that. That's right, 2,000. So having said that, leaving money on the table is not because anyone is careless. It's because Social Security optimization is genuinely complex. And most people get advice that's either too simple for the decision they're actually making, or it's not indicative of what their personal situation dictates should be done. The most common thing, though, I hear is, I'm just going to take it at 62. It's my money. I've been paying into it for my whole life. And a lot of times people will say, well, the future of Social Security is questionable. I understand that. But here's what that decision actually costs. The difference between claiming at 62 versus 70, for example, is a 76% swing in your monthly benefit. 76%. Most advisors run a break-even calculation and they say if you live past 80, delay, if not, claim early. That's not wrong, but it's incomplete. And here's why. Most people miss this. If one spouse passes away, the survivor gets the higher of the two benefits for the rest of their life. So the delay decision for the higher earner isn't just about their own benefit and maximizing those dollars. It's essentially like a life insurance for their spouse. And the spousal benefit strategy, coordinating both claims together, can add tens of thousands of dollars or more in a lifetime income that never gets modeled in the most basic break-even calculations. Okay. So here's what a proper Social Security strategy should look like if you're together. It factors in both of your earnings records, the age gap between you, your health and family history, what other income you have coming in. It factors in your living expenses. It factors in, can you bridge the gap between when you retire and when you start claiming, but also critically, the survivor benefit. The most common optimal strategy for a married couple where one spouse earns significantly more is the higher earner delays to 70 to lock in the maximum survivor benefit. Granted, that is not always the case, but we do see that pretty frequently. The lower earner can claim earlier to provide income during the gap if necessary, but let's also not forget about taxes, because tax mitigation is one of the cornerstones not only of our practice, but good financial management also. And most people are unfortunately unaware of how Social Security actually gets taxed. So I think if you're going to walk away from one thing about Social Security, just remember, this needs to be a coordinated strategy, not a solo decision, and it needs to be taken into consideration with all the other aspects of a person or a couple's financial lives. And it's worth running the numbers before you just randomly pick a date or stroll down to the Social Security office. Mistake number 3. And this one surprises people. You could have $1 million saved and still run out of money in retirement. Savings and income are not the same thing. And let me show you what I mean by that. So everyone's focused on the number. How much do I need to retire? What's the magic number? But the real question is, how much reliable monthly income can my savings actually produce? How much do I need and for how long? Without an income plan, you don't know which accounts to pull from or in what order. A market drop in your first 1 to 3 years of retirement can permanently damage your portfolio. And that's called the sequence of returns risk. And frankly, it's one of the most underappreciated dangers in retirement planning that frankly, most people don't talk about. And I think it's because most advisors aren't even aware of what it is. You might also withdraw too much too early without realizing it, or too little and spend your whole retirement afraid to enjoy what God's already given you and provided. The other thing a lot of people do is they look at the 4% rule and assume, okay, well, if I just use the 4% rule, then I figured out retirement and I don't need to do anything else. The 4% rule is a okay starting point, but it's far from a plan, and it makes a lot of assumptions that may not be applicable to your lives and may not really be applicable as much anymore as they used to be due to inflation, since, as most of us know, things have gone up quite a bit in the last few years. So here's a framework I use with clients that I think you could use that'd be beneficial. So I call it the 3-bucket strategy. Bucket 1 is essentially your safety net. This is cash and short-term financial instruments, can be bonds or CDs or treasuries or things like that. But it's designed to really cover roughly 2 years of living expenses. Its primary job is to make sure that you never have to sell investments at a loss to pay for your bills, and also to make sure if a rainy day does come, it is covered. You don't have to dip into other assets that are geared for longer term goals. Bucket 2 is your income bucket. These are things more like intermediate duration investments, could be bonds, could be dividend producing assets, could be other forms of fixed income, could be some combination of those plus some equities or other things. Its goal, though, is to provide for different goals that you have that are between, let's say, years 3 and 7, that are 3 to 7 years out from now, but also it replenishes bucket 1 as you draw it down. And then bucket 3 is long-term goals that are usually 8 years or more away from now. And those are the types of goals that you have where that are geared more for growth. So these are probably more the types of assets or accounts that you're going to see owning things like stocks or long-term growth assets. Maybe not exclusively those. Obviously, not putting all your eggs in one basket is a sound investment choice. So being diversified is good. But this bucket has time. It can weather a down market because you're not touching it for potentially 8 years or longer. And it's also worth noting the order that you withdraw from your accounts. Taxable first, then tax deferred, then Roth, combined with strategic Roth conversions along the way, is what in some cases makes the whole system tax efficient. Now, I'm not saying that that is boilerplate for everybody. However, it is a good framework to at least look at and then look, does this fit your situation? And if you're not sure, obviously asking a professional, whether it be us or someone else, would be incredibly beneficial. But the idea here is that the more taxes that you can lawfully mitigate, you can have your assets last longer. As a Christian, I firmly believe pay unto Caesar what is Caesar's. In our situation here in the US, this Caesar is the IRS, and the IRS has given us a rule book to play by. Most people are reactive when it comes to taxes. Our practice is focused more so on being proactive when it comes to mitigating taxes, so that by the time our clients get to their CPAs or whoever prepares their taxes, they're saying, wow, okay, these things you did saved you this much in taxes just this year alone. That then compounds over decades and can only make your assets last that much longer because you have more to draw from. And again, I just have to say this is not one size fits all. It's a framework though, but it can give you a retirement income structure or some structure instead of just, let's say, crossing your fingers and hoping and it turns out well. So I've covered a lot. So let me just ask everyone a quick question. Of those 3 mistakes, which one hits closest to home for you? And you can drop this in the chat. You can email me. Would it be tax planning? You maybe never thought about Roth conversions or had anyone model them out for you. Another one might be Social Security. Maybe you and your spouse haven't sat down and actually coordinated your claiming strategy yet. Another one could be your income plan. You have savings, but you don't have a withdrawal strategy. You're not sure which accounts to draw from first or when to draw from them. Again, you can email them to me at will@mat25capital.com, or you can drop them in the chat. And if you have any ideas or if you have any thoughts that you want to share, feel free to. There's really no wrong answer here. These are all the most common gaps I see. So you are part of the crowd. If you fall into these categories, you're not the only person that feels that way. Okay. If you don't have any thoughts on that or you don't want to share it, that's okay too. I'll try to answer everything, by the way, as time progresses. So again, if you do have any questions, thoughts, just let me know. Otherwise, I am going to keep moving. Okay. So mistake number 4, forgetting to plan for generosity and legacy. And this comes right from Matthew 6:21. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. This is a mistake that matters a lot to me personally because it's where faith and finances intersect most directly. By the way, as a side note, a lot of people I know will say money is the root of all evil. That is actually a misquote. The verse actually says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Having money is not in and of itself a sin. Having money be your God is, and there's a big difference there. So in most financial plans that I've reviewed, especially for people that are retired, giving is usually treated as a last line item somewhere near the bottom. And it's really meant for whatever's left over in the people's minds. But for Christian families, generosity really isn't optional, and it isn't an afterthought, or at least it shouldn't be. It's a calling and it's a blessing, not just to those that are receiving it, but those giving it. You know, the parable of talents doesn't say invest well. It says be faithful with what you've been given and deploy it for God's purposes. What I see happen in practice is giving drops in retirement because people feel like they can't afford it anymore. There's no tax efficient giving strategy. So families end up giving less than they could because they're not structuring it right. Frankly, they think that donating to charities and churches, while those things are good, are the only options at their disposal, and they're really not. And the estate plan also doesn't always reflect their values, and wealth will pass to the next generation without the wisdom that really created it in the first place. They're just handing off dollars, but they're not necessarily handing off the values and the wisdom that will really help the next generation manage those dollars well. In my view, that's really not faithful stewardship. But the good news is there is a better way. So here are 3 tools, and this is not an exhaustive list. There's a lot more options than these, but these are just 3 that I want to share that I use with clients in times who want to be strategic givers. Okay. First is what's called qualified charitable distributions, or QCDs. So if a person is over 70 and a half, you can donate directly from your IRA to a qualified charity. That distribution satisfies your RMD requirement and never shows up as taxable income. So what you're doing is you're giving the same amount that the IRS is requiring of you, but paying less in taxes because it's being donated. Now, granted, it's not necessarily a tax advantage per se. That's a feature of the tax code designed to encourage generosity, but it is one strategy that people can deploy that perhaps they haven't considered, especially if they have funds in those types of retirement accounts that they need to take out per the IRS, but maybe they don't need them to live off of. The second would be what's called donor advised funds, or DAFs, and these have gained a lot of popularity, especially in recent years. So you contribute a large amount in one high income year. You get the full deduction in the year you give it, but then you're able to distribute that amount to charities over time. Those funds also can be invested, which allows them to grow, and then you're able to give even more than the amount that you initially contributed and got the deduction for. And this is, by the way, wonderful for business owners or people who had, let's say, a really big income year, who want to be philanthropic, who want to be charitable, and also simultaneously lower their tax burden, but also magnify and amplify what they're donating other than just the one-time donation. So again, this is just a few ideas that we share. There's a lot more, but I want to at least give you 3 things to keep in your mind if you're so inclined for philanthropy. So the third one will be donating appreciated stock instead of cash. A lot of people, well, let me back up. If you've ever been on the board for a nonprofit, you know that people sometimes do donate stock and other appreciated assets. This, however, though, if you haven't been on the giving side, is something people don't always hear about. You essentially, by doing that, could avoid any capital gains taxes entirely on what you've donated, and the charity gets the full value of whatever you donated. It is a wonderful way, especially for people who have, let's say, worked at certain companies for years and years and maybe received stock options along the way, to be able to lower their own tax burden while being philanthropic, but completely benefiting the charity dollar for dollar for what they're donating. So again, there are many, many other options, and there's lots of combinations of these as well. It's not usually one size fits all. But when you plan generosity the way you plan everything else, you can give more and you can keep more, which might sound contradictory, but it's really not. And I believe that is a plan that not only means you're being a good steward and you're being financially responsible, but you're also honoring the Lord with what he's given you. Okay, so mistake number 5, trying to do it all alone. Proverbs 11:14 says, "Where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors, there is safety." And I am saying this not to sell you anything. I have no interest in trying to sell anybody. It's because the data on this is clear, but more importantly, the Bible is even more clear. And whether it be myself or anyone else, we all do ourselves a disservice if we don't seek wise counsel in areas where maybe we are not as knowledgeable as others. So I've heard this before, and I'm not going to knock anybody, but I've heard people say, I can manage this myself. And honestly, for the part of your or the phases of your life where you're accumulating wealth, like building the nest egg, some people do fine on their own. You know, they're saving every month, they're dollar cost averaging, they're doing what they can, they're letting investments compound over time. That's usually pretty simple and doesn't always require a lot of extra advice. However, retirement is a completely different game. In retirement, you're now drawing down from that nest egg. You're not building it up anymore. You are now at the capital preservation distribution phase of your life. Tax laws change. Social Security rules are enormously complex, like we've already touched on. Medicare interacts with your income in ways most people don't even understand. Estate planning involves legal, tax, and family dynamics all at once. And when the market drops by, let's say, 20, 30, 40%, emotions are high. People are saying, what do I do now? And if they don't have the right counselors and advisors in place, they may make tragic decisions that permanently impact the rest of their lives and maybe even the following generations. So Vanguard, most people know, has published research, what they call the Advisors Alpha, that estimates a good advisor adds approximately 3% per year in net value through things like tax planning, behavioral coaching, withdrawal strategy, things like that. And again, this is not a guaranteed number. It doesn't always show up in the place of investment returns, although it certainly can, because unfortunately, studies have also shown most normal investors underperform the markets significantly. But it is something to show that having the right advisors in your corner giving you sound advice, especially during major life transitions, does add a significant amount of value. So for example, on a $1 million portfolio, that is a $30,000 a year addition or preservation of value. Or another way of looking at it, let's say that 3% is compounded over a 25-year retirement. That 3% compounded over 25 years equates to over 100% in additional value that a married couple or person would gain by having sound advice and sound advisors in their corner. And again, that's obviously not guaranteed, but it is a material difference that could be made by not going at it alone and having a team of professionals helping you make sound decisions. And again, I'm just going to say this, that's not a sales pitch. I frankly hate being sold to. I have no interest in selling people. That is just what the research shows. And the question is whether the advisor you're working with is actually delivering on that or somewhere close to that. So here's what I'll say. For anyone who's looking for a good advisor, and it doesn't have to be us, it could be anyone, there should be at least 3 things that you're asking them. Okay. First, look for the CFP designation. It is the gold standard in our profession. I believe the number is less than 30% of all people who claim to be financial advisors have it. It requires years of education, a very comprehensive exam. It also requires a certain number of years of experience in the business, as well as having a clean record and ongoing ethics requirements. Not to mention, a CFP is a fiduciary, and that is important. If you want to ensure you're getting the best advice possible, you should make sure that whoever you're working with has their interests aligned with yours. And best interest is very different than legal fiduciary responsibilities. Second, if they're going to be helping you manage assets, make sure that they are a fiduciary asset manager. That means they're legally required to act in your best interest first and foremost, not earn commissions by recommending products. And again, it comes back to eliminating conflicts of interest so that their interests are aligned with yours. Excuse me. Third, ask if they specialize in retirement income, not just investment management. There is a big difference. And frankly, I see this a lot, but there really is a material difference between somebody who's, let's say, good at just building wealth and somebody who's really good at distributing it sustainably. They're not the same thing. So make sure if you are interviewing or talking to people, they check at least those 3 boxes. And frankly, the 4th one too. But this is more so specific to people that this matters for. So if your faith matters to you in this area of your life, find somebody who shares it. That doesn't mean that they're less rigorous in the other areas of being being an advisor, but it means they understand what you're ultimately trying to be faithful to. And frankly, in my practice, I've been doing this for about 16 years. I find that I have to share with people, I'm in the relationship business. A lot of people say, oh, you're in the investment management business, you're in the finance business. And while there is truth to that, I'm in the relationship business, and relationships are built on trust And a lot of times trust comes from a foundation where people share certain core values. So I would just share those things with you. Again, whether it be us, doesn't have to be us or anyone else. Make sure that people are checking off those boxes if you're considering working with them. So let's kind of bring this all back together, okay? So mistake number one was ignoring taxes. And the fix for that is possibly, amongst other things, strategic Roth conversions during the golden window that usually falls between the age when you retire and age 73 before RMDs kick in for pre-tax retirement accounts. Mistake number two was getting Social Security timing wrong. The fix for that is a coordinated spousal claiming strategy that factors in all the different things we talked about, including survivor benefits, the age gap, health history, family history, longevity, income sources, living expenses, the gap between when you retire and when you start taking RMDs, etc. Mistake number three was having no income plan. And the fix for that is one way, having a 3-bucket strategy with a deliberate withdrawal order. And there's other things we can say to complement that, but that is at least one actionable thing that you can do that will help your situation. Mistake number four was treating generosity as an afterthought. Some of the fixes, but not all of them, is building it into the plan with things like QCDs, donor advised funds, intentional legacy planning, etc. And mistake number five was going at it alone. And I believe the fix for that is finding a qualified advisor, preferably a CFP, who is also a fiduciary asset manager, who is as closely aligned with your values and your goals as possible. If a person does these 5 things and does them well, that can make a substantial difference of potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars and decades of peace of mind over the course of a retirement, and possibly help continue wealth into future generations. So here's one thing I'll offer. If you want to, you don't have to. We have a scorecard that we have designed that helps people know exactly where they stand on things like taxes, Social Security, income planning, legacy, overall readiness for retirement, etc. You can go to mat25capital.com/scorecard. It's a 20-point multiple choice scorecard that you can fill out. It takes about 3 minutes. It's up to you. Again, it's a free tool, but it's a good place to at least start so that you know where you stand. And again, that's at mat25capital.com/scorecard. If you've already done the scorecard, or if what you heard today made you want to go a little bit deeper, here's what I'll invite you to do. If you want to, you can always schedule a complimentary retirement clarity call with me. You can book it at mat25capital.com/contact. We'll look at your scorecard together. If you've done it, I can at least identify some of the gaps that are specific to your situation, and we'll talk about what a path forward could look like, whether we're a good fit together or not. At the very least, we're out to see a little bit of each other's time. At most, though, perhaps we can help you get on the right road to get you from point A to point B and where you want to go in your life. Again, no pressure, no pitch, just trying to bring some clarity to people. And that's the commitment I make to everyone who gets on that call, is just you'll leave with some good information. Again, we serve families in the Woodlands, but we work with people all across the country and in many states. So, all right, we've covered a lot of ground. I want to open up for some questions. Again, if you haven't, you can ask your question live on video, or if you prefer, email it to me at will@mat25capital.com, and I'll answer it right now. Don't be intimidated. No question is too simple, and no question is too complex for that matter. This is the part I actually enjoy the most, because real questions from real people are always more interesting than me just hearing my own voice and my own thoughts. So with that, I will open it up to any questions. And like I said, feel free to drop them in the chat. You can always drop them into Q&A or email them to me. Okay, so one question is, how do we know if claiming at 62, 67, or 70 is going to be best, other than just the dollar amount being higher the longer you wait? Okay, so like we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, it's unique to every person's situation, whether you're single, you're married, who the higher earner is, who has the longer history, etc. But one thing I would always look at is, don't look at it in isolation in terms of just what the highest monthly benefit is. While that is certainly a consideration, you need to look at what accounts are you going to be drawing from and when? Are they going to be predominantly pre-tax accounts? Or are they going to be Social Security that you're going to be relying on primarily, or after-tax accounts? Will there be individual accounts, joint accounts, Roth, etc.? Those are all things you would look at. Also, if you are married, look at perhaps family history on both sides. See who has perhaps the longer or more longevity with family. That also can play a part into it. And this is another thing I'd share. Most people are surprised. Social Security is taxed up to 85%, meaning that up to 85% of your benefit can be taxable. And so mitigating that is important, but also the amount of income you show can inadvertently push up your Medicare premiums significantly. And that's why I like to say, don't look at these things in isolation. You need to look at them congruently and together, and how do they all work together? If you pull this lever, what happens to these things? So that's how I would approach it. I've actually done a whole nother presentation on just Social Security alone because it is that complex. So if you are approaching retirement and you are wondering about that, I would recommend, I couldn't actually recommend this enough, do your due diligence, run the scenarios, make sure you have a plan for how and when to draw that. Don't just start claiming the first day you're able to. Okay, another question is, what about the state of Social Security? Don't they say it's going to be defunded soon? So there's no question about it. There is a big question mark as to the future of Social Security. If you've seen graphs that have come out recently, we are now at the point where essentially people are drawing from that benefit as much, if not more so, than people are paying into it. And so this should not be something that people go into willy-nilly. At the same time, you have to recognize that we don't know what the legislation is going to be. Okay. Now, the hope and the assumption is that people start drawing from it will be grandfathered into any future legislation, and so they're not going to be penalized. We don't know for sure if that's going to be the case. Some people have commented otherwise. Again, we don't know for sure, but this is why we need to be looking at other sources that people have for income other than just Social Security. And frankly, it goes back to Social Security was never intended to be the primary or exclusive income source for people during retirement. So sometimes it means having tough conversations about drawing from other accounts first, maybe working a couple extra years, sometimes maybe delaying Social Security benefits or starting one of the spouses earlier. Again, it should be a coordinated decision, not just isolated. And I know lots of people have questions about Social Security, but that is just that I would say Social Security, frankly, is probably one of the most common things I get asked about. And so I spend a good deal of time talking to people about it pretty often. So I understand where it's coming from, and I don't blame anybody for asking about that. What is a good portfolio for somebody who is about to be retired? How much should they have in stocks versus bonds, or how much risks should they be taking? This is actually well, they're all great questions, but this in particular is a really great question, and I love answering it because number one, it's like I mentioned earlier, it's not one size fits all. What works for one person or one couple may not work for another couple. However, there have been studies about this, and what I have found to be true, a lot of times people inadvertently think that once they become retired and they now need to be focusing more on capital preservation as opposed to accumulation, that they just automatically should go to the most conservative, least risky portfolio possible. And that is a categorical mistake. Now, should you in theory be getting less risky and aggressive as you get closer to needing to draw dollars? Absolutely, that is good planning. However, some people do take it too far. They become too conservative with their investments. They now don't have as much opportunity to keep up or possibly outpace even slightly things like inflation and taxes, which erodes their purchasing power over time, but also detracts from the longevity of their assets. So yes, a person should not be as aggressive with their portfolio in retirement as they were, let's say, their 20s and 30s and 40s. Absolutely. But there is a risk with also taking too little of risk. And keep in mind, There's always a balance, and there you should always be diversified. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you have a large concentration of your wealth in one particular investment or asset, like whether it be a single stock from an employer or in real estate or a business or anything illiquid like that, you also have to look at concentration risk. So that's a real thing. I've talked to numerous people over the years that they worked at one company for 30, 40 years, and they have a lot of money in that company's stock. They believe in the company, they like it. But that being said, if that one company, let's say, has a tough year or multiple years, well, now your entire retirement is potentially going to be damaged because of that one company. And so that's an added thing that I would share. Make sure you're taking the appropriate amount of risk. Don't take too little risk. Don't take too much risk. No, and this is another thing too. This is something that I actually started saying years ago, because growing up, or not growing up, but coming up in the advisory business, so many advisors ask, what is your risk tolerance? What amount of risk are you comfortable with? That's a good question to ask. However, I personally believe the more important question to ask is, what is your risk necessity? Meaning, how much risk do you need to take to give your portfolio, but also your plan, the greatest likelihood of success? So for example, if we're trying to target a 30, 40 year long retirement and leaving assets to children afterward, we look at, okay, modeling in market downturns, but also bull market years and everything else, withdrawals, taxes, all those different things. What is the optimal amount of risk to take to get you from here to the finish line, make your dreams and goals a reality without taking too much risk that you're being exposed to maybe too much volatility, but also without taking too little to where you're now on the opposite side and you don't have as much of a chance of success because you're not earning enough on your money. It's always a balance. So that's what we look at. And frankly, your risk tolerance and your risk necessity may not always be the same number. In fact, a lot of times they're usually different. Not always by a lot, but at least by a little bit. So I don't mean to be vague, but I will say, to answer it directly, a retirement portfolio should never be too aggressive. It should never be too conservative, and it should never be too concentrated in any one particular asset or asset class. So that is a wonderful question. Here's another question. Life insurance. So how necessary is it? Do I keep my life insurance policy that I've had for years, even into retirement? What are my thoughts on annuities? So that is a multi-pronged question. So let me try and answer it sequentially. Should you keep life insurance into retirement? Possibly is the short answer. Keep in mind, when it comes to life insurance, the number one goal for life insurance always need to be to insure your life. If you have reached retirement, and God forbid, if you were to pass away, if your family does not need the life insurance money, then I would question whether or not you should keep the policy. Now, it's a different scenario when you talk about permanent versus term insurance. Term insurance, you have no equity. It's like renting. So if you've been paying premiums on it and you don't really need life insurance anymore, you just stop paying the premium, and it just saves you on cash flow, excuse me. If it's a permanent policy you have, that's a different story, because you may have been paying into that for years. It's designed to last the rest of your life. You more than likely will have accrued some kind of equity, some type of cash value, if you will, in that policy. So what we run a lot of times, and you can ask your agent to do this if you have one, is run what's called an in-force illustration. And what that will show, if you ask the right questions for it, is if I stop paying premiums, but I keep the policy going based on the cash value that's in this account, and however it's earning interest, there's lots of ways it can, how long will this policy cover the premiums it costs to insure me? And some can have a rider where there's a no lapse guarantee. There's lots of different things. Permanent policies do get a lot more complex. So that's the way that I approach it. I don't unilaterally say keep it or get rid of it. Insurance is a tool. And again, this is why I approach it this way. A lot of people who call themselves advisors, really, I'm sorry to say it, they're just insurance agents. Nothing wrong with being an insurance agent. But if the only thing that you're able to do for people is sell them insurance, then your answer for everything is going to be insurance. Keep your insurance, more insurance, buy insurance. Insurance is not always the answer for everything. Sometimes it is the answer, but sometimes it's not. You're not going to go build a house with just a hammer and nails. You're going to need to have a lot of other tools in your belt, so to speak. That's the way I view insurance. Insurance is a tool. It serves a purpose. If that purpose is still being met, keep the insurance. If it fits the financial plan, keep the insurance. If it doesn't anymore, then we have to evaluate what to do with it. Maybe it's get rid of it. Maybe it's to withdraw the cash value. Maybe it's direct those resources elsewhere. It depends. But I don't just approach it, keep or reject the insurance unilaterally. My job is not to just sell you product. My job is to be a CFP, a fiduciary, an advisor, and say, how does this impact your overall life and your financial well-being? And then the last part of that question, annuities. Oh boy. Annuities have got a bad reputation over the years, and rightfully so, but more so it's for the people that are selling them than it is the product themselves. Again, an annuity is a tool. But the problem is a lot of people out there sell annuities because it is how they are compensated the most, or it's because it's the only solution that they have in their arsenal to offer to people, or some combination. Are annuities inherently bad or evil? No, they are not. There have been some cases where annuities, frankly, are the best solution based on the goal you're trying to solve for. However, I will say this much. There have been more situations where I have been confronted with a goal or a situation for a client, and this happens multiple times every year, where an alternative to an annuity can solve for the same goals and or problems that they're trying to solve for without all the strings attached. Not always, but a lot of times. And here's the thing you got to understand about annuities, if you take nothing else away from it. The person selling an annuity is always going to profit and do well from selling that annuity. The person buying it, though, may not always do well from buying that annuity. And that's why they have garnered such a bad reputation, and why firms like Fisher Investments, frankly, spend so many marketing dollars on, frankly, smearing them, or maybe not smearing them, maybe that's the wrong word, but let's just say warning people about them. I didn't mean smearing. That's the wrong terminology. I didn't mean that, but let's just say warning people about them. So these are good questions, and I think questions people should know. Okay. With that, I know I'm about to run out of time. I'm sorry if I couldn't answer everybody's questions. If you do have additional questions, again, please email me at will@mat25capital.com. Again, that's will@mat25capital.com. I hope that I was able to answer everybody's questions. And again, I'm going to read this verse. This is taken right from Matthew 25:21. This is the verse that we actually get our name from. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. That verse is why this firm exists. That's what faithful stewardship is aiming at. Not just a comfortable retirement, but a life you can bring before the Lord and say, I try to honor you with what you gave me. So let's pray and then we'll close. All right, Heavenly Father, as always, we thank you for your blessings. Thank you for this time together. I pray the people that have been watching this were blessed by it. I pray that they got some good information to help their situations. I pray that we all are ultimately good and faithful stewards of whatever you have blessed us with. Please guide us in our decisions. Help us to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And please protect all your people around the world, especially those who are being persecuted for your sake. In Jesus' name, amen. So thank you again, everybody. I greatly appreciate everyone's time. Again, if you'd like to reach out, my email is will@mat25capital.com. Our website is mat25capital.com, and you can also call us directly at 832-639-3398. Thank you all so much, and have a blessed day.